Welcome to another Audio Cultures lecture, Audio Branding and the Soundscape. In this lecture, we will look at the concepts of sound branding or audio branding, discuss the concepts of the soundscape, consider problems and challenges for sound designers working in the field of audio branding, and look at future opportunities. What is branding? Branding is a marketing strategy. Well, that's well and good, but what is marketing? Marketing is everything involved in bringing a product or service to market, including market research, product development, selection of sales channels, advertising, and promotion. Another answer from Shumun, Sumaira, and Thiessen is that marketing is the process of creating a relationship or a connection between a company's product and the emotional perception of the customer for the purpose of generating segregation amongst competition and building loyalty amongst customers. An easy mnemonic that describes the process of advertising is the 4 A's. Remember that advertising is almost the final step in the stage of product marketing. The 4 A's include awareness, attitude, action, and action. First, we must generate awareness of our product or service amongst our customers. Advertising aims to manipulate the attitude of our market to our product. What do they think or feel about the product? The third A, action, requires that advertising is aimed at producing sales. We want our audience to call us up and order our service or purchase our product in the shops. And the fourth A is to do with repeated action, repeated purchasing, and this is all about generating loyalty or habit amongst our consumers. Now we look at the concept of sound branding, and we're taking some of these ideas from this text, Audio Branding by Minsky and Fay. They say that sound branding is the systematic creation of an entire audio language for a brand based on its essence, vision, values, promise, and personality. In this approach, sound branding is applied at every customer touchpoint. Touchpoints include the sound of the product itself, radio and TV advertising, instruction and promotional videos, podcasts, telephone on hold music, in car parks, corridors, waiting areas, trade fairs, treatment rooms, website and social media, mobile apps, shuttle services, retail environments, meetings and conventions. So you can see there is a lot of scope for sound branding in this approach. Every single place where a customer comes in contact with your product, service, or resources related to your company must reflect the essence, vision, values, promise, and personality of your product or service. Let's start by looking at a typical institutional or corporate branding manual. This is often the starting point where the brand essence is defined. Here, we're taking some slides from the UTS brand guidelines from April 2017. The university's brand is targeted at developing the university's vision. And the university's vision is simply stated as their aim to be a world-leading university of technology. One way of delivering on this brand is through something called brand drivers. These are simple catchphrases that help to define the brand. We can see 4 brand drivers here. As you read these, you might think to yourself, how could I design music or sound that helps to express these brand drivers? So the first is adaptive generation, ready now, forever able. What could that sound like? Deeper focus, a drive that sets us apart. Diverse intersections, infinite possibilities with innovation. While you're hearing these brand drivers, you should be thinking to yourself what instrumentation, what sounds, what tempo would express these ideas. progressive drive, the energy to make positive change. The university's brand drivers enable it to drive brand UTS forward and define its competitive edge. Remember, we heard that product differentiation or segmentation was one of the key features of marketing. The brand drivers are intended to provide a blueprint for how to achieve the university's objectives. They're action-orientated, they have direction, they qualify how the university should design and organize its communication, typically through sound branding. They're used as a collective, they give an overall feeling for what the university is about, and they help the university and its marketing processes to extract and communicate its overarching story. There are a selection of brand attributes, and these define who the university is, what it stands for, and what it considers to be important. Each one of these could describe audio content in a sound branding or sound marketing strategy. The university's brand attributes are energetic, authentic, creative, open, and entrepreneurial. Consider to yourself, what does this sound like? This is the client's brief to you as a sound designer. Now, we can think of the branding of the university as expressed through all sorts of different media. Significantly, the university invests in spatial or architectural branding. Consider the design of UTS Central or the Chow Chak Wing building, designed by the famous American architect Frank Gehry. Do these capture the university's brand attributes? Think about the spatial branding of the grand reading room in UTS Central, the new library building. Some of the ideas behind this space are the idea of the technology of the future linking to the learning of the past. This spatial design, architectural design, is aimed at expressing this aspect of the brand attributes. This space is meant to capture the brand drivers, adaptive generation, deeper focus, diverse intersections, progressive drive. Does this space express these things to you? From a sound design perspective, each touch point could have audio branding attached to it. The brand manual, vision, brand drivers, and brand attributes should determine the selection and design of sound elements. Well, that's the current state of sound branding, but let's look back at some historical branding and marketing strategies. Initially, the way to make contact with your market is through a one-on-one sales pitch. And interestingly, you'll see in the brand manual for the university a description of what type of speech we should use, how we should organize the language that we use to engage in our sales pitch or our day-to-day interactions with customers. You might like to think for a moment about how you will develop your own marketing strategy for your products and services as a music and sound designer when you enter into the marketplace. Often your first point of contact with potential clients is through a telephone conversation or a face-to-face meeting, the so-called elevator sales pitch. Historically, print media and advertising has been a key marketing strategy. Product design differentiation, what the product looks, sounds, and feels like. Traditionally, electronic mass media, radio and television advertising have been used. As we move into the present, marketers start to think of whole-of-business branding, marketing, and product development as an integrated strategy. Most recently, we see personally targeted digital advertising through social media. This leads to product placement and influencer marketing via the internet. Ultimately, part of a whole-of-business branding strategy involves the environmental and experiential design of interactions between the company's product and service and its clients or customers. One of the oldest sound branding strategies is the advertising jingle, and we'll have a look at some examples of these. Product sound design itself is a more recent aspect of sound branding, and we'll look at some examples of this as well. The audio logo, a short piece of sound that's attached to the product in its advertising content, just like a visual logo, and we'll have some of these to look at. The more integrated sound branding system, which integrates long and short pieces of audio content, environmental branding and experience design, is the ultimate aim of integrated sound marketing or sound branding. Now let's look at some examples. Here's a classic 30-second jingle from 1982.
Yeah, just look at you go. You're moving. Sometimes you can't slow down. You're rolling. Big Mac and a Coke on the go. McDonald's. We know we won't slow you down. You've been going strong all day. Yeah, you deserve a break today at McDonald's.
Here the combination of visual design and audible design integrate to create an overall experience for the listener. Here's an example of this exact same classic strategy of the 30-second jingle brought into the 21st century.
Who's the goat you love to feel? Get your goat on. Aussie, so you know it's real. Get your goat on. Creamy makes you feel so good. Get your goat on. Rub it on your skin, you know you should. That's right, that's right. Goat soap, the one to choose. It's the only one I use. Look for the original goat range with Frankie the Goat on it. Available at all Chemist Warehouse stores. Get your goat on.
These are the marketing strategies that you love to hate, but this is such a successful strategy that it's employed in modern marketing strategies just as it was in the 1930s and 40s in early radio. Musicologist David Huron has analysed the function of music in advertising, and he was looking particularly at the jingle. This is from a classic paper written in 1989. He identifies 6 key roles for music in advertising. Now, one of the things that he points out is that more effort and care is put into the 30 seconds of a classic jingle than is put into any 30-second component of music, except perhaps for the leading 30 seconds of pop music now in the streaming age, where they determine whether a listener will skip or not skip. Here are the 6 roles for music advertising that Huron identifies. A term that he uses is entertainment. Now, entertainment is not so much to do with a pleasurable listening experience. The key concept of entertainment here has to do with capturing and maintaining the listener's attention. The etymology of this word is linked to entrainment. The second is to do with structure and continuity. As the visual content changes rapidly in television advertising, the 30-second jingle holds the whole material together in one whole structure, providing continuity. Clearly, memorability, the earworm, is one of the targets of music in advertising. The jingle contains both musical sound and lyrics. The lyrical language is crafted through the key strategies of poetics, rhyme, assonance, and alliteration to create an overall pleasing and memorable effect. The 5th point is targeting. Music targets a particular audience. It may target a specific audience segment or target a broad general audience. The 6th role for music is to establish the authority of the product or service in the mind of the listener. So much for the classic 30-second jingle. Let's look at some product sound branding. So this is the design of sound into the product itself.
Companies take great pains to make their products more appealing to consumers. They deliberate over the color, the fragrance, and the packaging design. But lately there's another detail product makers are fussing over: the sound. The crinkle of a paper wrapping, click of a cap, whoosh of a spray, or the ding of an alarm, all are now more closely scrutinized as companies vie for an edge over rivals. I'm Ellen Byron. Today we're going to be talking about how much consideration goes into the sounds these products make. Snapple considers the pop an iconic part of its brand, even though it happens only once at the very beginning before you've even tasted the product. Snapple was so confident that users associated the pop with safety of product that it eliminated the plastic wrapping around the lid of its bottle. Volkswagen Jetta, in an ad introduced this spring, highlights the thunk of its car door as a symbol of its quality.
The solid thunk of the door on the Jetta. Another example of Volkswagen quality.
Sound can convey luxury. Product designers at Clinique working on this new mascara made sure that a tiny plastic nib inside was just the right slope so that the click was the right pitch and the duration was just long enough. Bigger products require a bigger sound. This clutch, which will be hitting stores in time for the holidays, was manipulated so that the sound was big enough to reflect how substantial this eyeshadow compact is. So when you close it, it's a big thunk. Sometimes product makers strive for no sound. This tampon, launched by Procter & Gamble this spring, is the quietest wrapper the company's made yet. The plastic is embossed so there's no crinkle, and this label, the adhesive, is carefully balanced so there's just enough to stick but not enough to make any sound. And now I'm going to show you why this is here. This is the DC39 made by Dyson, and the company says this vacuum is the quietest one it makes in the US. Dyson in recent years started focusing more on the sound that its machines make when it noticed that consumers in Japan wanted a quieter vacuum so that they could vacuum at any hour without disturbing their family or their neighbors. The folks who work on Sharpie marker at Newell Rubbermaid insist that every tip of a Sharpie marker must make a scritch-scratched sound when it moves across the paper. The scritch-scratch is the actual nickname inside the company, and it's important because it says that sound accompanies the boldness of the marker itself. Method, which makes this all-purpose cleaner, recently evaluated the nozzles on all of its spray bottles. It believes that the quality of this nozzle reflects the quality of the formula inside. And what they strive for is a quiet spray bottle that makes no noise. It evaluates it for any kind of squeaking or chatter, it calls it. Companies tell me that they pay so much attention to the sounds their products make because they ultimately want to hear cash registers ringing. Thanks for watching. I'm Ellen Byron. We'll see you next time.
You might remember Barry Truax and Murray Schafer talking about acoustic design. So what we've just seen there in terms of product design is the application of acoustic design to the smallest features of physical products that companies are producing. Okay, on to the Sonic logo. You will be familiar with the idea of a Sonic logo, and here are just a few examples.
PlayStation 2!
You can see that Sonic logos, audio logos, combine a number of different approaches. Some are simple timbral events, some contain melodies, some are simple chords or harmonic fields, some include vocalization or speech, and some contain a combination of these things. Each of these sounds is expressed with particular instrumentation, whether synthesized or acoustic, And all of these components are brought together by a music and sound designer in order to achieve the brand goals of their clients. I want you to spend a few seconds just to try and think of a sound branding experience that you've been exposed to, perhaps in advertising, perhaps during your web browsing, perhaps product design or a logo. What form does it take? Is it a jingle, a logo, some sort of experiential design? Pause the video and spend a few seconds thinking. Was it effective? If you remember it, I guess it was. Sound designer Joel Beckerman has worked on a range of high-profile music and sound branding projects. And here is an example of a project for the American Sports League Super Bowl. Beyond a mere jingle or theme music, a sound branding system covers all timescales, from logo-length sound design to musical tags and links to full-scale musical overtures. The original Super Bowl composition was created by the famous cinema composer John Williams, and it's been used by Super Bowl for many years and has been passed with Super Bowl to their several broadcast partners, including Fox and NBC. Let's listen first to the theme music. As a sonic branding system, this is worked through in the broadcast of the game itself. Now, in the segment that we're going to listen to, what we're hearing essentially is underscoring. But in the audio department of the broadcast company, they have a system to play out different musical elements of different lengths. So, for example, for a score, a try, a field goal conversion, different musical elements are played out as short musical cues. Let's just listen to this underscoring underneath the voice. Now you can see in sports broadcasting the importance of the game call or the voice, and perhaps you might consider that the underscoring gets in the way.
I am Rich Eisen, giving you highlights of Super Bowl 45. The Pittsburgh Steelers trying to win one for the city of Pittsburgh for a seventh time. Look who's doing the coin toss.
Boy, that man is
Left-handed. Deion Sanders getting the coin toss. The Steelers lost the toss. Eventually, the Packers get the ball. Jordy Nelson almost had a touchdown catch to start things off well for the Green Bay Packers, but it went right through his hands. The Steelers getting the ball back. The ensuing play, Heath Miller can't corral it. Steelers forced to punt as the defenses ruled the day early on in Super Bowl 45. Next Packers possession, 6-play of Aaron Rodgers escapes, dumps it off to Brandon Jackson, who pushes it inside the 40-yard line.
Showing his mobility and making a play.
3 plays later, Rodgers looking deep for Jordy Nelson. This time it works. Touchdown, Green Bay.
Great job by Jordy Nelson getting back in front of the defensive back and shielding.
Okay, what we're hearing there is a highlights package of the previous game, and you can hear how the musical theme is developed in an up-tempo version to elicit the excitement of all the most exciting moments of that replay package. Okay, moving on now to spatial branding and environmental design. So this is the new frontier for you as music and sound designers, where the total experience for the customer is crafted down to the detail of what it actually sounds like. And we're going to consider this through the lens of the concept of Soundscape. Now we know that R. Murray Schafer invented this concept, but the concept has been taken up in the field of acoustics and noise control. And here is a definition that comes from the International Standards Organization statement on Soundscape. They say soundscape can be a key determinant in the development of attitudes, beliefs, judgments, habits, visitor and user experiences, for example, activities, actions, and mental states, health, well-being, and quality of life, as well as reduced social costs for society. So this is what acousticians and noise control engineers thinking about when they're thinking about the term of soundscape. We might think of spatial audio branding as the operationalization of these soundscape concepts. How do we take these key determinants and apply them to come up with carefully crafted experiential and environmental designs? So what is soundscape? Murray Schafer, in his book Our Sonic Environment and the Soundscape, The Tuning of the World, thought of soundscape holistically as the result of all of us in the process of composing the world, whether we do it well or not so well. Truax describes soundscape as an important component in what he calls acoustic community. An acoustic community is a system within which acoustic information is exchanged. So what we're doing as sound designers is developing sounds that can be exchanged and become meaningful within an acoustic community. Kang, in his work on the ISO soundscape model, says that it combines physical, social, and psychological approaches to understanding sounds in the environment, particularly ones that are placed there as a result of both intentional and unintentional design. So Schafer was very concerned with the unintentional design of noise pollution, and he tried to predict or think about a future role for sound designers in developing what he would have called acoustic design, intentional acoustic design. Soundscape design can be effective or not, depending on the careful use of analysis and evaluation. So we might think about the spaces in which we are inserting sound. Now here's a mock-up I've made of what we might call congruent acoustic design. And in this concept for a greengrocer, what sort of sounds fit into this space? What are the brand drivers or brand attributes that might determine a successful sound design for a greengrocer? Now this concept has actually been designed in actual supermarkets, and the success or failure of a design of this type needs to take into account the soundscape that's present. Here we have a collection of fresh, clean, and wholesome sounds that should match the essence of the product that's being delivered. Okay, so sound branding in retail spaces is obviously an expanding area of work for sound and music designers. So here's an example of an interactive experience design. Now, I don't consider this to be a particularly successful design. This is taken from a Danish context, and it's promoting a soft drink within the supermarket.
Hej, har du set mokai hyldeblomst lige foran dig? Mokai er forfriskende let med en dejlig smag af hyldeblomst. Den gode smag og det elegante design gør den perfekt til enhver lejlighed. Tag et par mokai forfriskninger med hjem i dag. Tak fordi du lyttede, og have en dejlig dag.
So in this design, a motion sensor triggers the playback of a voiceover and some sound effects related to the product, played back by a directional loudspeaker placed direct overhead of the product, intended to influence the purchasing decisions of shoppers in the store. Now, you can imagine how this could rapidly become very chaotic. Here is a pitch for a retail sound design strategy, which is intended to manipulate the emotional experience of consumers. It's targeting the Toy Kingdom in Harrods department store in London, and it's developed by a very famous sound branding agency called the Sound Agency.
Roll up, roll up, boys and girls, mums and dads, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, one and all, to the magical world of the circus. See the clowns play and tumble. See the lions roar.
In this design mock-up, we see sound design for the different zones in this large retail store. You will have noted the text to do with generative sound composition, so rather than having repetitive musical loops, the system is designed to select and play out material in a randomized sequence to maintain the variability in the soundscape. So much for the designer's mock-up. In this piece of video from a YouTuber, we see the actual reality of how this plays out in real life. So here you can see the rather grim reality of how the designer's intentions play out. An important step in the design of a commercial soundscape is an analysis of what the actual soundscape sounds like before the insertion of new sounds. You can hear elements of the original sound design competing with the ambient sound of children's voices, and even at one point you hear the designer's intentions corrupted by the inclusion of an advertising jingle for a specific product inserted into the carefully designed soundscape. So the first steps in any sound branding strategy involve a requirements analysis. First, we have to identify the stakeholders. So these are the customer and the users of the space, perhaps the employees of a retail facility. And one strategy for working out stakeholders and their needs is to develop what's known as a user story. This is an imaginative exercise where we ask, as a given person, as a given stakeholder, when I engage in a certain activity in a particular location, I want something because. So we might think of the retail shop assistant in the Harrods department store and work out a user story based on their needs. As a shop assistant, when working in the toy department at Harrods, I want to be able to focus on the customer's needs and help them to complete a purchase because I get a bonus when I enhance the sales of the department. Now, the question for the designer is my design going to enhance the shop assistant's ability to communicate and meet the needs of the client? We might develop a user story around the experience of a small child or the child's parent. So part of the requirements analysis process is to think through use cases. Where in the life sequence of a product is this audio going to be applied? And we might come up with a set of specifications or requirements based around the brand essence or the mood to communicate, thinking about things like brand drivers. We might want to think about the functional requirements, the context in which the sound will be played, and the desired outcomes. We want to think in terms of how long the material is. Is it a very short logo? Is it a longer environmental composition? We want to think in terms of the instrumentation. What sort of instrumental sounds are going to invoke the mood or brand essence? We might want to think about the structure of the melodic, harmonic, and rhythmic aspects. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is the melody optimistic? Is it thoughtful? What shape does the melodic contour need to have in order to express those characteristics of the brand that we're aiming to develop? And we might want to think about how it plays out in the context. Is it designed to link to visual elements? Can it loop? Should it be interactive? Should it be responsive? What other practical requirements are there in terms of the play out of the material? So here we're going to return to this idea of the soundscape as developed in the International Standards Organization definition and conceptual framework. And part of the ISO documentation is a kind of network diagram which describes how the perceptual construct of the soundscape is developed. So it's important to think about soundscape as something, a construct, something that's developed within the consciousness, within the perception of a listener. So it all starts with auditory sensation, and auditory sensations arise generally as a result of sound sources. We might also have imagined sounds. And those sound sources are part of a larger physical environmental context. And the context has an influence on what appears as an auditory sensation to the listener, what comes into the foreground. So the context might involve the actions of a listener. Are they shopping? Are they walking? What are they doing? So this link between sound sources and context and sensation is what we might call an acoustic environment. The listener, as a result of sensation, the listener interprets that audio sensation. They may pay attention to it, they may not pay attention to it, depending on the context. And as a result, there will be a set of responses. So the listener may run away to get away from that terrible chaotic sound in Harrods, or they may pay more attention, or they may ignore, depending on the context and the actions that the listener is engaged in. So we see a rather complex feedback loop here. So there's no simple stimulus response here, which is part of the traditional communication concept, a source and a listener, a stimulus and a response. Actually, the perceptual construct of Soundscape is a complex network feeding back from sources to responses, and the responses change the context. And the overall result of this is a set of outcomes. Now, for product design, those outcomes want to be something to do with attitude, awareness, action, and repeated action. So we might think of this model as a process that involves a listener, but actually there is no listener here. There is auditory sensation and interpretation, and those things produce, in a sense, a listener. The listener doesn't exist before it enters into this relationship with Soundscape. Commercial sound designers such as Beckham, Soars, and Treasure are usually content to accept two sometimes opposing groups of factors that influence the interpretation of sounds within the soundscape. The first group of factors relies on a model of a universal listener defined by uniform cross-cultural responses to sound. The second thinks in terms of an interpretation to sounds that is largely place, culture, demographic, and subculture specific. Now, our approach to sound design needs to work out this conflict between the idea of a universal listener that we can design sound for and a specific group that we're targeting in terms of our designs. What all three authors agree, these are writers on commercial sound design, is that the response to sound is usually formed by subconscious or preconscious processes. So the way that sound affects and influences a listener is not always conscious. They're not always paying attention. Sound gets in underneath in an unconscious or subconscious way. And this is key to the success and the power of sound in sound branding. But it also presents a challenge to the sound designer, to the marketer, in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of a sound design strategy. If a listener is not necessarily aware of the sound or their response to it, what can we really learn from what they say about their attitudes or beliefs about the sound? Okay, so thinking ahead, thinking into the future, what sort of sound technologies might we be employed to work on? And augmented reality is obviously one of the things that's on the horizon. So augmented reality in its simplest design is the mobile phone where the camera is used to display the environment around us. Google Maps uses augmented reality, and information about the environment is displayed on the screen. We can imagine devices like the Microsoft HoloLens or Google's smart glasses as a method of displaying visual or textual information on top of what we can see in front of us. And it's a simple step to add audio to this augmented reality design. Now, in this video, which I'll play a few minutes of, the artist Keiichi Matsuda imagines a future hyper-reality where augmented reality design has gone completely over the top.
Fantastic. Great. Nice. Great. quieres una buena calificación.
Voy lo más rápido que puedo.
¿Has pensado en correr? Es saludable y eficiente.
Seguro que no hay más trabajos disponibles. Yo estudié para ser profesora y estoy haciendo mercados.
Y además puedes quedarte con los puntos de fidelización. Eres una monje afortunada. Tienes que confiar en la aplicación. ¿Te sientes inspirada? Gracias. Chao.
¿Quién soy yo? No, eso no es lo que quiero decir. ¿Para dónde voy? No. Puedo volver a empezar. Olvídalo.
Estoy presente ahora. Me amo. Estoy libre de mi ira. Estoy libre de mi tristeza. Y el amor es mi instrumento.
Habla español, niña.
Adiós.
Olá, eu sou Maria.
Bueno. Hola otra vez. Ay, no, cállate. ¿Qué está pasando?
Buen día, Emilio. ¿Qué puedo hacer por usted?
¿Qué está pasando? Mis puntos están bien.
No se preocupe, sus puntos están seguros conmigo. ¿Le puedo ayudar en algo más, Emilio?
Yo no soy Emilio, yo soy Juliana Restrepo.
Por favor, espero.
Hola, Juliana Restrepo.
Okay, there's so much happening in this video. I recommend you go out and see if you can find it. It's on YouTube. But interestingly, some of this dystopian concept of the future is coming to play currently in some mainland Chinese cities where face detection and tracking technologies are being employed to give people citizenship points. And that's one of the things that was referred to in that video. And you listen to the sound, the chaotic sound design. This is something that we don't want to end up in. So there are obviously opportunities for new sound branding applications coming in the very near future. And I want you to think to yourself, what are some of the untapped or emerging opportunities? Consider examples of poor product or sound system design, and consider emerging technologies. So maybe pause the video and just think for a while. One of the things that I've noticed is the use of television advertising in petrol stations. Now, the typical dialogue, music and sound effects soundtrack that's used in this televisual advertising at the Bowser is, I think, very ineffective, and some more interesting design could be developed there. So just pause the video, spend a few seconds thinking about what might be coming up over the horizon and how you might find a role within that emerging context. Okay, I hope you got creative. Now, there's a lot of information out there about audio branding, sound branding. The Audio Branding Academy is one of the international organizations that is focused on developing the market for sound branding. And there's a useful list of references here for those of you who want to look in more closely at some of the sources behind this lecture. I hope that has got you thinking about audio branding and perhaps thinking about your futures, potential avenues for commercial work for yourselves. Thanks for listening.